Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on this 7th episode of the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid conversations for clinical research sites. Today on the show, we're joined by Jeannie Farnsworth. She's worked in clinical research for 20 years now and worked across a multitude of both therapeutic areas as well as roles, including study coordination, clinical care and conduct, regulatory oversight, site operations, onboarding, training, as well as site management. She's currently a Research Compliance Analyst at Banner Health. We had a great conversation today, everything ranging from the increasing use of telehealth in a post-COVID-19 world, talked about training new coordinators, and the difference between SOCRA and ACRP. So without further ado, here's Jeannie Farnsworth. All right, Jeannie, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm kind of asking everybody, how are you holding up in this, post-COVID-19 world?
I think that, we're all holding up pretty well, right? It's one of those double-edged sword questions. You want to ask, how are you doing? But then do you at that moment in time have time to listen to the real answer? And so I kind of sometimes refrain from asking how people are. But then I think, I think in the very beginning, everyone was super scared. And I think now we're kind of getting used to this new norm and helping each other out and kind of more brave and the problem solving more than ever before. So I think pretty well. I mean, there's more solutions. We have more knowledge now than we did 2 months ago. So I think that's good.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It's there's still a lot of fear, even at least from a site level. We're still getting patients to come in or enrolling patients in new trials is still presenting a lot of challenges. We've seen how sponsors are doing their best to come up with different ways, or really just start instituting the already existing technology to help, see patients remotely,
right?
And things like that, which has been very interesting. I wish it were a little more well organized than what I saw from a lot of sponsors.
Yes, I agree.
Especially, this is 2020. It's about time. It's both sides of the coin. It's great that this is driving some innovation. At the same time, it's a little bit sad that it's taking this to create these shifts in an industry that should be on the cutting edge of technology,
I know, but sometimes people have to wake up to the fact that they should use it. So I know, like with our patients, some of them have been really hesitant about technology because they always had in the back of this mind that in-person was the only way because that's all they knew. And once they got a hold of that ability to have telehealth work for them, now we're going back to, do they actually want to come on site again? So
sure.
I think that's kind of funny. And I know that some of our investigators, from friends that I've talked to, they were hesitant about using telehealth platforms, but they found that 80% of the time they didn't actually need to palpate or see anything of the patient, but a lot of it is conversation and checking in with the patient, with our protocols. And so 80%. So
I'd be really curious to know too how it changes the dynamic between doctor and patient when you don't have anything else to go off of other than having to listen and listen hard to what the patient's telling you.
Yeah, and I feel like they're just, from what I've heard, is they seem to be more engaged because they know that when this physician is going to call in and see you, FaceTime or whatever platform they're using, their time is dedicated to you. Now, they are on the clock still, but they're not as distracted as when they were in the clinic going from room to room. So I thought that was kind of interesting news to hear. So I think
Sure.
I'm really glad and excited. Like you said, it's unfortunate that something like this had to happen to force people to just do it. But now that people have done it, they're getting comfortable with it. And I think that part is exciting. We can move forward finally in 2020.
Indeed. Yeah. And it'll be exciting to see where the future keeps taking us. Hopefully this is just the tip of the iceberg and we continue to rely on that technology going forward. So yeah, it's been interesting. I'm glad to hear most sites I've talked to are managing pretty well. We were pretty fortunate. We never had to really shut down per se. We obviously wanted to keep everyone safe and out of the clinics as much as possible, but we were able to continue enrollment and some follow-up visits here and there where we could. So it's been encouraging to see the clinical research world sort of all stick together and keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you think about all this exposure, though? I mean, I've been in the field for almost 20 years now, and I can tell you most of my friends and family have never had a clue what I did before. And
Right.
with all this media attention, it's been kind of nice that they actually have a better understanding of what I do. It's not just staring at a computer. It's not just about analyzing things.
Sure.
But it actually leads to progress. And so again, it's unfortunate that a pandemic educates the public about what we do. But I think that's if you have to look at the silver lining of things, I think that's one to look at for sure.
Yeah, we sometimes we just have to take it where we can get it, and if that's where it comes from, that's good. And I have read some things about the idea that this level of focus that clinical trials are getting will contribute to increased enrollment numbers as time goes on. Now people are a little more engaged and educated,
Yep.
about what clinical trials are and what they do. So, I mean, that's really exciting, and hopefully we can avoid the, politicalization of of the clinical trials that some of this has brought on, obviously. And
Right.
I don't want to get in the weeds with that, but
Right.
hopefully that doesn't, create an opposite situation where people are, more afraid. But it seems like it's been, again, a very a positive frame for clinical trials. So
Yes.
again, very, very interesting times.
Yes, I completely agree. So
Very cool. I'm very curious. This is something that is just always fun for me, and I'll probably say it in every podcast. But I always say nobody sets out to work in clinical research. They tend to fall into it. So I'm curious to know a little bit about your background and sort of how you first got involved working in clinical research. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
absolutely. That's one of my favorite questions to ask people too, because like you say, no one seeks out clinical research. And for me, I had just graduated from college and I had my sights set on some sort of graduate work. And I was a pharmacy technician at a cancer center at Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I just, I'm one of those weirdos that I read all the instructions and the footnotes. And, when you bring something home from IKEA, right, I'm opening up the instructions. My husband's already building, right? So
Sure.
when my boss just kind of started introducing me to protocols, I loved it. I love the footnotes. I love the exceptions. And I would remember them. And so I just remember after many failed attempts at a particular pathway in life, excuse me, this particular principal investigator said, you're really good at clinical research. I really think you should stay in this field. And it was a natural fit because I love the science behind it. I love the progression of each trial. I love that where our patients, they had tried other treatments and other things, and this was another reason to give them hope because it allowed them more opportunities. And so I dove into a master's program and I haven't looked back since. So I feel like I'm one of the really lucky ones that fell into it, didn't really know what it was. Because, that first day you hear all these acronyms and you feel like, what planet did I land on? And back then, the internet was still pretty new. So it's not like I could have just Googled a bunch of acronyms. I just,
Sure.
you just sit on as many meetings as you can. You read through these protocols and you kind of wing it for the first 6 months. Right. So like I said,
for sure.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I think that's again, sort of a very common story. When I started clinical research, I had no idea what I was doing for, at least 6 months, probably more than that. It took me forever to really figure out what's what, and then even longer to really get a feel for the full cycle and everything that's involved, not just your little snippet or little window that you see
Right.
as a clinical research coordinator in the beginning.
Right.
So this actually, just a little natural segue. I mean, it looks like you do some instructing for clinical research fast track.
I do.
I'm, as someone who manages coordinators, I'm always looking for the best way to train and educate coordinators. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I don't know that I found a way that's any better than just training somebody on the job as you go. But that obviously has some ridiculous limitations in that it might take them a year to see everything that can happen in a clinical trial, right? I mean,
Right.
I've been doing it 10 years and I still see stuff that I'm like, what is this? What am I doing here? What do I need to do?
Right.
So I'm curious to know a little bit about them and your affiliation. I've seen Clinical Research Fast Track around. I just don't know much about it.
Okay. Well, Clinical Research Fast Track, I'm really proud of them because what they're doing is they're bringing in new talent. So they're looking at, they have to vet their students, of course. And so they're looking for fit in personality, they're looking for fit in background. And these range from people who have a business major to, foreign medical grads from abroad, and they've ended up here. And so they run them through like a month-long training, and they're teaching them everything that you would ever want to onboard a brand new employee. So I've been where you're at, Brad. You try to train someone, and if you're lucky and you're not busy enough, then yes, you can properly train them, but it has to
Right.
be on the job, right?
When does that happen?
Right.
When are you not busy?
Right? When are you not busy? And so with them, they're looking for passionate people willing to make a difference, willing to have the attention to detail, to have good communication skills. So for about a year and a half, I was a director for them. Prior to that, I was a teacher for them. I've continued to teach for them. I realized how much I missed out on the field. So they're able to bring in new talent, and these are bright-eyed, very intelligent people who want to make a difference in a healthcare kind of way. So there's a lot of training and education as far as when they're talking to candidates for their program. And, prior to this pandemic, there was like a 2-week internship. So they would do their in-person training, they would do some online training to reinforce what they learned, and then they would go to an internship. And at the internship site, they would be able to apply, all that book theory, but actually put it into practice. And we had a pretty good employment rate because Fast Track also would help these students get jobs. And I think it was right around 72% of students. And they had to really work hard because, as you know, this is such a highly regulated field, and it's a field that people don't know about. So they're kind of distrusting of newcomers, right? But I think in the internship, we kind of opened eyes at sites on how you can properly train someone. And so, and I think my curiosity was piqued about Fast Track because as I was exiting one institution, we got these resumes and one just stood out. And then at her interview, I had no idea she had not actually worked in research, but she knew the lingo. She knew those acronyms that, we had just talked about. And I just kind of thought, how in the world does she even know the acronyms when she hasn't really worked in research? And she had mentioned that she had gone through this training. So that's kind of how I first got connected with them. I'm really big on education and training and to be at my best game. So I've been with SOCRA. The minute I was qualified to be certified, I did. So I've been part of them for a long time. So currently I'm the Phoenix chapter chair. I really believe in the power of networking and relationships, not just for like business, but just I'm really curious about what's happening in cancer, what's happening in dementia, what's happening in neurology. I mean, there's so many cool things that are happening that I can't single-handedly do it all, right? So for me, I love our chapter meetings because I'm able to talk to old friends, new friends, to hear about what they're doing and what they're learning. And I hear about new diseases. I hear about new ways of implants and different things on how to treat something. So I love this field, and I love the ongoing training everywhere you turn, even the technology too.
Yeah, there's a almost limitless number of things you can learn about or pursue just within the clinical research field. And that's what drew me to it as well. I mean, you're not going to do the same thing every day.
Nope.
And you don't, so you better not want to, because you're not going to. let me go back. I'm curious to know. This is sort of just a random personal aside, but SOCRA versus ACRP.
Yes.
When I worked at a university, they had a SOCRA chapter.
Yep.
And I went to it, and it was great. It was a lot of people got together. They shared a lot of information. I learned a lot from going to those meetings and from just networking with those people.
Yeah.
When I left, the place I worked at was ACRP.
Yep.
There's no ACRP chapter where I'm at. I don't know. Is there any, as far as you can tell, or is there any distinguishable difference or benefit or philosophical, I guess, the philosophical differences between the two? I've never known, or are they just the same thing with different acronyms?
I love that you asked that question because, I have friends who are either SOCRA or they're ACRP, and then this very small group of people who do both. And I think that they have foreheads growing out of themselves, right? Because why would you do both certifications and maintain all of those credits and things like that, right? So, I guess as plainly as I can say it in the kindest way that I can deliver it, SOCRA tends to be academically at academic centers. They tend to be not-for-profit. They tend to be government institutions. ACRP tends to be more pharma and CRO heavy. SOCRA, they recertify every 3 years. ACRP recertifies every 2 years. There's only one designation for SOCRA. It's the CCRP for professional clinical, certified clinical research professional. And ACRP has all these different designations depending on the role that you have. And for me, when I first got started in this field, my institution was SOCRA, and SOCRA was kind of born out of an oncology need and very FDA focused, and whereas ACRP tends to really rely on ICH GCP. They've kind of, in the last 20 years, converged and merged the two together, of course. And so I can't really say if one's better than the other, but I think that
Sure.
I think their aims are really the same: to train, to educate, to certify, to network, to continue to better this field in whatever medium that we can, right? So, I had a friend who I finally asked him, why do you have two certifications? Because to me, I just think you have too many heads on your body. And he just kind of said, for me in my network, I didn't want to exclude myself to just one niche of government, not-for-profit academic medical centers, or just seclude myself to only pharma and CRO. I wanted to have both of them in my pocket so that I could just have the world at my hand. And I kind of thought that was kind of the best response that allowed me to understand. So for him, he's very career driven as well and wants to do a little bit of everything. And I've watched him do that. So I think that's the best way that I can distinguish the two.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I felt like I just sort of arbitrarily left SOCRA and got my certifications from ACRP without really, even now, understanding why,
right.
which is, again, I know it's obviously subjective to say which is better or worse, but
right.
And I'm sure they both obviously have their perks, and they both are aiming towards great things. So certainly this is not I'm not trying to put one down over the other.
Right. So pick one
very good.
Or pick both, I guess.
There you go. Well, very cool. So where are you at today? Are you at your Banner Health?
I am. It is a large hospital institution in Arizona. And, I've been a coordinator, I've been a manager, I've been kind of like the SMO roles. And then I worked as a CRA for a short amount of time. And I really loved with all caps that job. But unfortunately, our sponsor required us to travel a lot more than I could handle. And so I needed a change. But Banner Health has been great.
See, I always ask my CRAs when they come through, about their travel.
Yeah.
And almost none of them are happy with the amount of traveling that they have to do. So
I know.
I can't blame you. I briefly considered, wanting to go down that road, and I was like, man, I can't spend that much time in an airport,
right,
or on a plane. So I don't, I don't blame you there, but it sounds like, you've fallen into a good place with research compliance.
Yep. Research compliance. I think that's kind of the next big thing, right? As we have more trials on board, instead of waiting, and this isn't a diss on external CRAs, but how can we improve quality at the beginning internally? And so our institution has a dedicated team to whether it's training, whether it's the startup, maybe it's source doc creation, and having a really good collection point to mitigate the risks that might be involved, ensuring that you have all the supplies that you need. They're pretty shorthanded, and we're kind of a special task force for compliance with this emphasis on research. And fortunate for us, we've all had some sort of research background. And so it's a really fun gig. And right now I get to be in the oncology scene for Banner MD Anderson. So I don't know if you knew that MD Anderson has other branches outside of Houston, but we're one of them.
I did not.
Yeah, so we're one
awesome.
of them.
So does your day-to-day, are you working with coordinators to monitor their work as a sort of before monitor? Is that,
yes?
Would that be fair to say that's kind of what it is you do?
Yes, I think that's a very fair assessment. So I would say 80% of my week is working with our coordinators. We have, for that particular site, we have these protocol implementation planning meetings. And so we're trying to look before that first patient gets to be seen at every single angle: finance, pharmacy, infusion, everything that we could possibly need, anything that could possibly be a problem. We try to resolve it right then and there as a group.
So that's amazing. That's an amazing concept. And the fact that you have sort of looks like you have sort of a diverse group of people weighing in on that, I assume.
Yes.
Obviously, you're not directly involved with the study itself, which gives you sort of a unique perspective, outside perspective to see, because man,
yes.
How many times do we take on a protocol and you're like, great, this looks amazing, we're going to kill it. And then, things take off and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is way harder. There's a way more logistical hurdles we have to jump through.
Yep.
There's a billing problem. We need to be invoicing for this. This is all these things that are very difficult, I think, depending on your role, but even not, they're still difficult to sort of anticipate. So
right.
Having a process like that is invaluable.
It really is. And I love that we work together as a team. And, sometimes when they hear that compliance is going to be around, some people start running the other way.
Well, that was my other question, is that how well received are you by, your normal clinical research coordinator? Because, hey, and to be frank, I might do the same thing. I'd be like, oh God, I got to talk to compliance now. What? Come on, man.
Right.
Let's do this thing.
Yeah. They never find anything good. Right. So,
right. Yeah. You're not there to pat him on the back.
Right. And I think that's the thing, though. I'm just that kind of person. As much as I might find quote unquote wrong, I think I want to find all the good things that our coordinators are doing. And so as much as I might give them feedback on findings, I want to give them feedback on what they're doing great, and ask for permission to share some of those techniques or processes that they've implemented with other teams. Because we're such a large institution. You'd be surprised how one group will do one thing and a different group in the same department is doing it completely different, right?
Yep. Nope. So, I've experienced the same thing in academic institutions and that's where the SOCRA meetings were useful for me, is to be like, what do you guys do? And wait a minute, that's completely different than what we do. That's so weird. But to go back, I think that's, obviously a huge point of value for you and for the institution, that you can you're going to see the whole breadth of, departments and different things that happen. So you can take those good practices and share them, roll them out, sort of institutionalize them, so that makes it, again, a really big value of what you can bring to the table.
Yeah. And I think that's how we're building our SOPs, so that they can be better streamlined and people can learn from the best practices, right? So as you know, SOPs aren't typically static at any given time and place. Right. So especially, in the last couple of months, we've had to tweak and revise. And as we move forward into the future, we're trying to figure out how do we best institute SOPs that will help our staff, of course, but also help our subjects and their families. So I would say most of our staff receives us pretty well, and we do as much training as they'll give us time for. And it's one of those things. It's a growing process too. Sometimes people are very protective of what they're doing, and they've been doing it for so long. So to be told that it might not be the best way, or to introduce a different way, right? But when you're forced into that situation, sometimes I had one coordinator tell me, she had we kind of scale things on a percentage, and she had one little finding, and it was in the regard of good documentation practices. Amazing coordinator, tons of experience. And she just said, "Why did you cite me on that?" And I just said, "If I didn't cite you on it, then you wouldn't learn from it." And then she said, you're actually really right, because ever since you pointed that out to me, I don't make that mistake ever again. And I was just like, well, that's why I'm here. So that you can do your work better.
That's exactly what it's all about. I mean, it's, wherever you can get that feedback to get better at what you do it's valuable,
Yep. And why do we want better work? I always go back to this with my family when I think about, why do I want to expedite research? Why do I want to use technology? Why do I want everyone to be trained? Because I know that every one of us will be sick with something in the future. Maybe not, right? Wouldn't it be nice to have that treatment available rather than it being held up because of bad quality, because of unusable data? That's why we all do it, right?
Yeah. And and to know that the, drugs, devices, and procedures that, may be used on us later were conducted, the trials were conducted with high quality, and the data was,
reliable.
Reliable. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. That's a fair point. So are there any tips, tricks, tools? What are some things that you use that you think might otherwise help the clinical research community?
So I think as a coordinator, for me, one common finding that I would have as a coordinator, as a CRA, and even in compliance right now is, we're all pretty good about training and maintaining our training documents. But the thing that I see is calibration. So calibration of your equipment. And it sounds so silly, your scale, when there's nothing on it, does it read 0 pounds? And when you convert it and you hit that button, does it say 0 kilograms? I monitored a site where, for whatever reason, the calculation in the scale converted the pounds to the kilograms incorrectly, and they were dosing patients at a slightly diluted concentration for their infusion, right? And it never occurred to them that they should calibrate the scale, right? But I've seen this in all sorts of equipment. And so that's one tip that I've given to people twice a year. Most states observe daylight savings time. You have to readjust that clock. Why don't you also do some sort of a calibration? So whether that's at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, right before daylight savings, or the first thing that you do when you get back from daylight savings starting.
Sure. I like the idea of kind of building in that trigger to remind yourself to, something that needs to be done. I mean, and really all your equipment needs to be calibrated annually anyway. You could put it right in with the rest of your stuff that's going to get a nice green or yellow sticker on it. So
yeah, absolutely. And then I think the other one is, I think sometimes especially people who are getting started, I think that's the best opportunity to, whether you're a new employee or new to research, ask questions, find a mentor. I think so many of us are so willing to share of our knowledge. But I've noticed that sometimes people are afraid to ask, and so they end up just doing it on their own, and they're flying solo. And
sure, a lot of that I think maybe goes back to the environment that you're in. So I started out in a academic department where there was a very aggressive chair for the department.
Yeah,
and he would like to come in and basically ask coordinators questions that they couldn't possibly know the answer to sort of try to trip them up. And as a result, it just created this environment of fear. And so people, you didn't want to ask a question in fear of looking ignorant or something like that. So,
right.
That I agree with you 100%. I can also understand why, especially in some, I don't know, higher pressure. I don't know if pressure is the word, but in some academic, especially institutions, I've noticed that there's this very strong hierarchy, and it can be trickier for people who maybe don't have the confidence to do that. But absolutely, you're right. I would recommend 100% do that, even if it's uncomfortable at first.
Right.
You're going to end up better off at the end of the day if you're able to follow through with that.
Yeah. So I think for those people, I would say, pay attention to see who you could ask questions for, because obviously you do want to be careful who you ask those questions.
Sure.
But I guess my point in that is when you're asking those questions, I think the best opportunity is, say at a new job versus 3 months later, when you probably should know the answers to those questions.
Right. Yep, fair point.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I was very enlightening chat. Where can people find you online?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'm always excited to meet new people, like I said, see what they're doing and how they're doing it, and how they failed in it, because we all learn from that, however humbling that is. But
sure,
I love it. This is one of the best fields, I believe, that exists, because it does have limitless opportunities, technology, data management. I mean, there's so much in research. So I appreciate your time.
No, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. I will post your contact information in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Note to File podcast. For guest contact information, as well as any resources mentioned throughout this episode, please check out the show notes at www.notetofilepodcast.com. If you have any questions, comments, or interview requests, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm Brad at notetofilepodcast.com. And once again, thank you for listening.